can't quite wrap my head around why it's so difficult for people to find good health and fitness information. It's all over the internet. My friends and family ask me what they should do, and I'm like, get on YouTube. All these people have your best interest at heart. Let's take a look at some of these.
Because I got this motherfucker right here. I am determined. It's my motherfucking magnificent obsession. I was obsessed with this shit.
See?
Play basketball without my knees hurting. Clue from Charles Poliquin was that the stronger and farther knee can go over the toe, the more protected the knee is, prior to which I don't.
Feeling good. And the results are in. Animalistic and primal styles of movement make people's bodies work better. They say walk before you.
Well, the good news is I should definitely have a morning routine. That's pretty straightforward, so definitely make sure I add that.
And add a pinch of Baja Gold sea salt or Celtic sea salt that will kickstart your metabolism.
Does this thing really work? And the science is like, maybe.
Wait, what? All right.
Man, it's just not how you eat or how you move. It really has to do with all 9 ancestral tenets. All 9 ancestral tenets is going to get you the right nourishment.
Okay. Makes sense.
Chronic disease, including cancer, and that is insulin resistance. You don't get insulin resistance by not eating. You get insulin resistance by eating too frequently. Too much insulin that leads to insulin resistance.
Wait, I thought eating a lot of small meals was a good thing. I guess not. Let me put that down.
Carnivore diet yet. It's becoming quite popular because of the amazing transformations in both health and weight loss.
Okay, so only eat meat. That's easy enough.
Vegans avoid any and all animal products, including meat, fish, poultry, eggs, dairy, and even honey. So what's left? Vegans eat fruits, vegetables.
I should only eat veggies? But I thought I was only supposed to eat meat. What the fuck?
We're going to show you how to start keto correctly. And this is for beginners. What are we trying to do? We're trying to switch what your body is running on as far as...
So I can eat meat and veggies, but carbs are bad, right? Okay.
Hack number one is eating your food in the right order. Scientific studies have shown us that if we eat the elements of a meal in a particular order,
So I can eat fat, carbs, and meat and veggies, but I gotta eat them in the right order to avoid insulin spikes. Okay, I guess that makes sense.
The American Heart Association says substituting artificial sweeteners for sugar added to food and drinks may help people reach a healthy weight and maintain it. It can also help diabetics control their blood sugar.
Okay, so artificial sweeteners are good because they're low calorie. Okay.
Risk of cardiovascular trouble, including heart attacks and stroke. Well, now researchers have actually gone back to try and find out why that may be. Basically, what's happening when you consume this sugar substitute. And here's what they found.
I thought they just said that they were good for fat loss. What the fuck? Shit, guys. I'm sorry. Clearly, the fitness and wellness space is not as easy as I thought to navigate. But before you give up, I'm here to provide you with my top 10 fitness follows that will hopefully help you sift through some of the BS that's out there. Now, some of the folks that I showed have actually really good content. So it's not a knock on all of them, maybe some of them, but it just goes to show you how confusing it is and how many people can have conflicting messages. And at the end of the day, my number one advice is keep an open mind. People can be right and wrong. And at the end of the day, you can take bits and pieces from each and every one of the people that I follow and the people that I showed and mold it into a really good experience for yourself and what works best for you. So before I go into my top 10 fitness follows, I want to share a little bit of background story of how I kind of got there. So 10 years ago or so, all I really had was bodybuilding.com. Podcasts weren't really a thing outside of murder mystery stuff. Instagram had just started to have influencers, which embarrassingly enough, I followed those guys who flex in front of Lamborghinis, the Shreds guys. They gave no information at all other than that they were buff and sexy, and that was it. Now, the way that I got to where I am now, interestingly enough, was a little bit of a bittersweet story, but looking back, I call it all sweet because it helped me get where I am today. So I started following a guy named Joe Donnelly, he's still alive, but I thought the dude was a stud. I reached out to him via his website to get a custom program, sent me over something which was clearly cookie cutter based on the questions that I had answered from him. And the volume was so insane that I don't know how any normal human could finish a workout like that. But that said, it really opened my mind up to that your heroes can be full of it. The other thing that Joe did that was really pivotal for me was he introduced me to Sal DiStefano, the co-host of Mind Pump. Now, he tagged Sal in some sort of post, shouted him out. Mind Pump actually had him on his podcast at one point. They had kind of a falling out over some of the BS that Joe's on, so makes sense. But nonetheless, that's how I found them. And so I will give Joe credit for that. That's kind of how I got where I am today. So for my number one fitness follow, I'm going to go with Mind Pump. Mind Pump is comprised of 4 folks. You've got Adam Schaefer, Justin Andrews, Sal DiStefano, and their production manager, Doug Egg. So each of them brings a different perspective and background to the table. Sal is more of your wellness guy, Justin's more of your sports performance guy, and Adam is more of your bodybuilder guy. But they all just have a ton of chemistry together. Their podcast is hilarious. It's one of the reasons why they're the number one fitness podcast. But the number one thing I would say, especially for people who are newer to the fitness space, they're a must follow. They do the best job, in my opinion, of explaining the behavioral aspects of fitness and really taking a dive into some of the more uncomfortable things of why people want to look the way that they do and looking at those insecurities and things like that that have really opened my mind up of how I look at why I train. And they've got tons of really good programs. I've run a number of them: Powerlift, MAPS Anabolic, MAPS Aesthetic, MAPS Performance, and all these programs have taught me a lot. Now, are they the subject matter experts in my opinion? No, but they have enough knowledge that when they do interview the subject matter experts, that they're able to help you understand those things better, and they've got an amazing network. So especially if you're newer to the fitness space, Mind Pump is a must follow. So you can find them at mindpumpmedia.com, where you can get their programs. They're on Instagram, they're on YouTube, they're on Twitter. I think Sal is because he got booted off Instagram, but great follow. You guys got to check them out. So let's continue on this journey. My number 2 must follow is Paul Favorites. Now, I've been following Paul for a little while on Instagram, and I was actually itching for Mind Pump to interview him. And once they did, man, my man crush went through the roof. Hearing him in long form, it was awesome. Paul does an amazing job at explaining pretty complicated athletic performance-based principles via video and other ways of communication that not a whole lot of other people are on his level. Paul is on this list because he shattered my paradigm on vertical jump training. So when I was in high school, my number one thing was I got to dunk. I did air alert. I did the jump soles. And did I see improvement? Yeah, for sure I did. But the volume on some of these programs is out of this world. And Paul really changed the way of thinking where you've got to use max intent on reps. And when you start to see a decline, you stop the set. Whereas air alert was like you do 50 reps and you do 50 reps. So yeah, I could jump pretty high, but 3-4 days out of the week, I could barely move and barely grab the rim because I was so sore from patella tendonitis. He does a lot of corrective exercise for athletes, and he's got a number of really good programs. I've run a few of them. He's got Fat Don't Fly, which is a little bit better for the general population, so it's a good little blend of performance meets hypertrophy. And then he's also got the best program that I personally ever run, not because maybe I thought it was the most fun, but because I saw the most results from it. Durability Code. Now, this program is really where I learned all the levels of regression that you can do, and it made me think a lot differently when I'm training people of the different steps that you can take to get someone to your end goal. And each exercise has sometimes up to 6-7 levels of progression. And so if you do it right, your joints will be feeling amazing. And I had done higher level plyometric programs, but this had my joints feeling so good that my body just trusted that I could output as much force as possible. And I was jumping higher, moving quicker, feeling just great. Walking down the stairs felt like I was just gliding on butter, man. It was amazing. So shout out to Paul, great follow. Also known as PGF Performance. He's on Instagram. He's probably on TikTok. He's maybe on Twitter, I don't know, but he's definitely got YouTube. So you guys need to check him out. Check out his programs at pgfperformance.com. And also check out his podcast, although he doesn't keep it up to date, but he's got 50 some odd really good episodes that I've enjoyed, and actually is how I found my number 3 and 4 guests that I'm putting on this list. Next up, Vernon Griffith. I found Vernon in an interview with Paul on his podcast, and another man crush. Might not be the last one on this list, but love the way Vernon thinks. Vernon is a really good blend of tactical, athletic-based, general population-based, all sorts of it. And it's no surprise that he won 2022 NSCA Coach of the Year. The guy's a stud. Great communicator, relates very well to all people. I've done a number of his programs, including Jacked Athlete, which is an awesome blend of hypertrophy and performance-based training, as well as his hip mobility program, which don't let the term mobility fool you. It's tough. It's definitely not you sitting in a pigeon pose just chilling. You are really grinding through, activating your hips, and it made a world of difference. So Vernon is a really, really good follow. He's got a really good way of communicating. And one of my favorite things that he said was, all these athletes that I'm training, 99% of them will not make it to the league or to play college, frankly, but they're going to have to human the rest of their life. And so I want them to enjoy the sessions so that they take away the exercise as something that's fun and enjoyable. And that really meant a lot to me hearing that, because I think that's a really important message that people will need to think about when you're training younger athletes. So back to Paul's podcast, found my number 4, which is Connor Harris. Connor Harris, man, this guy is the posture guru, man. He actually collaborated with Paul on the Durability Code, which, like I said, was a really good program. A big piece of that was Connor. He is extremely technical, extremely smart, and is really good with corrective exercise. And a lot of the blend of Durability Code was performance-based stuff, but also a lot of Connor Harris stuff sprinkled in on how to help prevent injury and imbalances and things like that. So I actually have run one of Connor's programs, Symmetric Strength, which by far is the best bang for your buck program that I've ever done. It was $50. It includes a full-blown assessment to figure out what side that you're lateralized on, which in layman's terms is essentially which side you can get into the hip and oblique on. So although I'm left hand and left leg dominant, I can get into my right and my right hip and my right oblique more. And the entire program is comprised of exercises that you do a little differently on each side, whether that's the right or the left, to help get into those positions better. So there's corrective mobility work, there's corrective lifting work, and each of his explanations, and I've shared it in the past, of his videos are damn near 5+ minutes long each. He is extremely thorough. That program blows me away that it's $50. It's a steal. If you're willing to work through the technicalities of it, it's definitely a grinder, which having that experience with the durability code really helped me understand kind of what I was getting myself into. But Connor is a great follow. You can find him on Connor Harris at YouTube, Instagram, all the social medias, but amazing follow. And this leads me to my next follow, number 5, Aaron Horschwig, or as most of you may know him as, Squat University. He is an awesome follow, especially for anything squat, deadlift, technique-based, and corrective exercise. He has a little different flavor to how he goes about corrective exercise than Connor. I would say Connor's a little more in depth, but Aaron knows his stuff and I think is a little bit better for the general population to receive and digest his information. But he's an awesome follow. I mean, I used him a lot when I was working on ankle mobility and started to realize how much of it I lacked. He's just got a really good plethora of exercises and YouTube videos on warm-ups and mobility drills and things like that. He's definitely a must follow. I will say my man catches a lot of hate for thirst trapping people with his thumbnails, which is funny. And now that I'm on the YouTube scene, I can see why he probably does that. But that's just an aside. But all in all, he's definitely a really good follow, and he's a lot more well-known, so you guys may or may not be even following him now. So this is where my story starts to shift a little bit, and this was actually within the last year that I found my last few folks. Number 6 is Tony Holler, aka Feed the Cats. My man Tony's 60 some odd years old, track coach out of Iowa high school, but he, number 1, helped me kind of pivot over to some of the folks that I'm about to talk to after. So I'm forever grateful for that. But number 2, really kind of shattered my mind on the performance side of things with kind of attacking the weight room a little bit, which I was kind of put off by initially, but I listened, and I think it's a really interesting concept. He's not about not lifting weights, but he's about speed training first and then lifting as an auxiliary or secondary element. And so he has a great podcast with Chris Korfus, who could be a notary member on this list too. I only had 10, or at least that's what I decided on. But he's an awesome follow. Definitely has a lot of really good sprint drills. And like I said, will make you think outside the box. Tony Holler, you can find him at feedthecats.com. His podcast is TFC, which is Track Football Consortium. But the guy interviews some really, really smart people, which is how I got to number 7. And another extremely pivotal person for me, expanded my network beyond belief, and I've learned more from this guy in the last 6 months and his guests than I've probably learned from anybody. But that's Joel Smith, aka Just Fly Performance. His podcast is amazing. He's interviewing the top sports performance people from Olympics to collegiate, professional, all over the board. And one thing I love about Joel is his mind is always open. He's always willing to try different modalities and really weird stuff that I had never even heard of. And he's really changed the way that I look at everything with fitness. And he's a big influence on why I really tried to take the next step to start training people and looking at things like isometrics and some of these different modalities that, yeah, they've been around, but haven't really been popularized. And he's very big on some of the cutting edge stuff. His podcast also affected my life personally. He did a podcast with Jeff Hauser and Sheldon Dunlap, and the podcast was on oscillating squatch, which was really cool because there's some crazy statistics about it, but that's not the part of the podcast that affected me personally. Jeff is a former Duke All-American, coached Olympic athletes, collegiate athletes, you name it, and he caught my mind because he mentioned that he worked with the elderly population, specifically those with Parkinson's. Well, my stepfather-in-law had a really bad accident 2 years ago and was a pretty in-shape guy for his 70s and ended up basically kind of getting through rehab and getting to where he was functioning, but just couldn't get over the hump. I messaged Jeff on LinkedIn, and it took a little while, which after I met him, I kind of understood why, because he's literally like 80 years old. But long story short, we emailed back and forth. He came to my personal house, this gym right here, which was a very, very cool experience. He loved my gym, which was awesome. But he worked with my stepfather-in-law for 2 hours. And when we asked him what we owed him, he said, "This is nothing." And he left and got in his car and went back to Raleigh, 30 minutes away. And that experience wouldn't have happened without that network of Joel. So obviously I'm a little biased here, but that was an awesome experience. So to get back to the list, another Joel Smith interview. Number 8, Jeremy Frisch. If you have kids in youth sports, whether it's your nieces or nephews or friends, sons or daughters, or your own kids, he is a must follow. He really changed the way that I looked at youth sports and how important it is to keep things general and have kids play multiple sports for as long as possible. Not only that, if you're under the age of 12, you look at his programs, you're not going to see kids power cleaning and doing all this crazy stuff. Well, it's going to be crazy looking, but it looks a lot more like a really cool modern PE class. He's got kids diving, tumbling, doing all sorts of things. And his method, there is a method behind it, is if you can't check the boxes of standing on one leg for 30 seconds and balancing, you're not ready to do a depth jump or a power clean. And so he has these kids really work on their proprioceptive abilities. And more importantly, like I referred back to Vernon Griffith, he makes it fun. So these kids are having a great time playing tag and different games. And so he really changed the way that I look at training youth athletes, and I want to make it fun for them. And you can create a very similar stimulus by a game, just the same as you can say sprint for 40 yards and I'll time you. And so that was a really cool interview, and he's got a ton of other really good ones, but a must follow for youth athletes. So another Joel Smith interview here on my list. Number 9, Christian Thibaudeau. So I almost skipped this interview, which is crazy because I've had a couple of those where I look back and I'm like, man, I'm glad I listened to that. I've listened to 2 or 3 of his interviews on Joel's podcast, and what I'll say is it's one of my favorite podcasts for learning information. He does a great job of explaining concepts like complexes, French contrast, all of those, but he gives you applicable information and examples to actually implement in your own training. So the whole early stages of my YouTube channel was this OmniRep phase programming, which he gave specific examples to of hitting a day of eccentrics, hitting a day of concentrics, hitting a day of isometrics. And I took all that information, took a ton of notes, and was able to build a whole program around it. Is it perfect? Probably not. But what I'll say is, most of the time you'll listen to a podcast and you'll get some really good concepts, but you're like, how do I apply these, and when do I program them in, and what stage is this? He spells it all out for you. Christian Thibodeau, amazing episode on Just Fly Performance. You can see him on Tib Army is his YouTube handle and his website. But awesome follow, has a lot of really good information and some kind of cutting edge stuff that frankly just isn't normal around neurotyping and different types of athletes based on how they move, and it makes sense. Have you seen those athletes that spring really easy? Have you seen the ones like a Saquon Barkley who, you know, is super powerful but has to get down into like a deep squat to get a jump? And you got the guys who barely bend their knees and they jump 45 inches. It's all around that very cool cutting edge stuff. I digress. And last but not least, and I didn't want to include a lot of nutrition advice, people, because this is about as bad as talking politics these days. But I tend to agree with a lot of things that he has to say. And honestly, he was really instrumental if you look at Instagram and simplifying nutrition with, as funny as it sounds, just pictures. But that's Max Lugavere. I've read his book, Genius Foods. It was 7 years ago. And it does a great job of not only giving you how to eat, but why you should eat that way. And frankly, I have a hard time disagreeing with a lot of what he talks about. He's done things like how do you eat healthy at McDonald's, or how do you make certain meals better. But he's also on the camp of maybe artificial sweeteners aren't good. And so he's got a science-based approach, and it's all due to his mom who died of Alzheimer's. And that's why he wrote the book Genius Foods, because he went down a rabbit hole of interviews and things like that to find out as much information about how you avoid, you know, a terrible disease like that. So you can feel the passion. Great speaker, great communicator.
Your hand if the image that you had in your head looked somebody like the person that you see on screen now. Okay, much less people. This is my mother, and her name is Kathy, and she has dementia, and I love her very much. And when I had to come to terms with the fact that my mom was showing the initial signs of memory loss in her 50s a couple of years ago, it was an incredibly traumatic experience for me, and it's still to this day incredibly heartbreaking to have to acknowledge.
Just awesome follow, especially if you're new to the fitness space and looking for some decent nutritional advice. Awesome one. But like I said, I didn't want to include a lot of these because that's quite a polarizing topic. But Max, I'll definitely give him a shout out all day because I think he's got it figured out. And that's my list. I hope you guys found this helpful. Hopefully the people that I shouted out and/or people in their network can guide you in the right way. But at the end of the day, I've done a lot of vetting over my days, and these people have all been pretty dang good follows. That said, always keep an open mind on both what might be right and what might be wrong. There's a really big benefit to following a bunch of different people's beliefs and kind of molding it into your own. I think that's extremely important. Don't become dogmatic about anyone on my list or anyone else's list that everything that they say is the right way. If you want to be vegan, great. Not that I agree with it. If you want to be carnivore, great. Not that I agree with it. I think these are all tools and all pieces that for the right person and the right format work. Same thing goes for the people that you follow. I hope you found this helpful though. Like, subscribe, drop comments if you agree or disagree, or you got some other people that I should check out. I've got a lot of other folks that I follow, but this was kind of the list for more so my journey and kind of how I discovered the folks that I did. Thank you and goodbye.